Mehana kako of okay o Manu Boyd. Aloha mai kaua e Mehana o ka.
Aloha, aloha, and welcome again to all of you to Midday Manaʻo with Manu and Mehana. And if something looks weird up here, right? Because we usually have somebody sitting right in between us, but our guest today is coming via Zoom. But before we get to him and introduce him, we'd like to thank our sponsors, of course, the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, and also the Kaiser Permanente Community Benefit Fund. Yeah, so mahalo to you guys for this ongoing. Like, we've done a bunch. How much episodes I think we've done? We've done over 20 already, so thanks to those sponsors because they're archived.
Yeah.
They're online if you ever want to watch these again, right, on YouTube, of course, on our hawaiiancouncil.org /podcasts.
When we started this, only earlier this year, I had no idea what Midday Manaʻo was. And it was because Sterling Wong actually called me and told me about it. And so I came. I didn't even know how to get to
Couple A?
CNH. Yeah, Couple A. It's not my but anyway, so but we've done dozens of shows so far, and it's so enjoyable. And being able to speak to a cousin today about birds.
Right.
So this is like a double whammy for me.
This is, Manu and Mehana, and we have the subject of Manu today, and just so happened that they are our guest, and Manu are related.
We would prefer you to be over here, but I've had Pana Eva on my mind, and look, here you are.
So of course, coming straight from Pana Eva, we'd like to welcome Nainoa Mossman. Aloha Nainoa. Of course, he's the founder of Birds of Hawaiʻi Past and Present, and we were lucky to be beneficiaries of his great work with some images that he was able to capture that we were able to use here at CNHA for some of our content. So thank you for that. And then there's some important stuffs coming up, right, in the month of January, having to do with our native Manus. But first, before we go into that, did you guys want to talk any more? Because I think our audience would be super interested in just like the conversation you guys were having right before we went on.
The family
live.
one or the bird one?
Yeah, both. No, but the family ones. Maybe we can get into the bird one. Let's go into the bird one too about the Kohala people, but just some,
Well, okay,
some family traditions.
And this is so Hawaiian style. You saying it. Nainoa Mossman. I don't know exactly which one he's from,
right,
but we're all related. But that's my grandpa's family, Boyd, Harbottle, Cleghorn, all them. But my name is Bird, and Manu and Mehana, and we were just talking about this, and it's interesting because of because they were our Kohala. North Kohala Ohana were bird catchers. They call them Lawaiʻa Manu or Kia Manu, and we're talking about different methods. But my bird is not a bird because it's not a native bird. But the kolea, and the plover can be used as a metaphor sometimes for people who come here to get fat and then they leave. But I got fat and I stayed. But anyway, but my auntie Katie Akana told me the story a long time ago, and I want to hear your story too again about how my ancestor Kavelo was a bird catcher, and he was given the name Manu because on his stomach, on the cliffs of Kohala, in the ohu, in the mist, probably in the morning or evening, and call out the shrill of the kolea bird. They come up and then you grab them, throw them in the roll up, and break them, and pepehi. But that's one way. But the point of that is that kolea was eaten as a delicacy. And so aikohana is to eat something all by itself. It's so ono. So manu aikohana. But you had just talking about that, and this is not even a digression. We're gonna talk.
No,
we're talking plover.
Great.
So here we go.
We're talking plover.
So peha ko manao no ke kolea, ka hopu ana I ke kolea, catching plovers.
Yeah, so in Kohala specifically, there's been kind of a cool way of catching kolea that isn't really known anywhere else. Basically what they would do is they would take like a small stone and some olana cordage, and then you'd kind of fashion that onto like a small wooden dowel. And to the dowel, you'd put a little grub or a worm or something that a kolea would eat on it. and then the kolea would come up and eat it, swallow the dowel, and get stuck because it's tied to the rock, and you could run up and grab the bird. And then and then the other one that it's related to how they were catching kolea, they would also catch ua'u in Kohala, and that's something that I've been able to work with quite a bit in my professional career is with ua'u in Kohala, and we actually use almost the exact same ways to catch them today as they did back then, but instead of fire, we use bright lights, but we also still keep using the same nets and everything. So it's really it was, when we were doing that, it really felt like a cool connection to that past bird catchers that used to be in that same place.
We're just talking about methods of catching birds and reasons for catching birds. Now, in the kolea sense, we're not making lehulu and ahu'ula out of kolea, but we're eating them. Certain people were privileged to eat them, but so because Mehana Okala and I are both po'ehula, a well-known mele, Ike ya kaukini helawai'a manu. Behold, kaukini, the bird catcher. And they say lavai'a. We think of lavai'a as to a holo, a fisher of birds is a kia manu. But in that mele, it talks about using smoke or fire as a way and nets to ensnare the birds. So we don't want to go out and start forest fires and leave Grandpa's net at home. But I mean, interesting. And those were because when the bird catchers are catching and then releasing birds. Now we're talking O'o, Mamo, Apapane, Iivi, and the others, is because when you gather those birds and you tie them into little bundles called uo, and those were one of the highest forms of auhau during the makahiki season. By the way, lono ika makahiki.
Lono ika makahiki.
Yeah, lono ika makahiki.
Right.
Solstice.
And solstice. Right? We are in this period.
We're just nailing them today. Wow.
Right.
So anyway, but I know this is not my show. Well, it kind of is. But anyway, I'm so happy to know that you. So yes, we're related. Boyd's, Mossman's. What I know, I played water polo with your dad. I come here, Meha. But enough about that. Go ahead, Mehana. Take us into the show.
So about half of our audience out there is stuck on Manu played water polo back at Kamehameha schools. So we know there's some pictures.
You know who my coach was?
Who?
Kihei De Silva.
Oh, wow. I know he played polo.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's
why
right. He played polo too.
But boy,
did you float though? That's the main thing.
Oh, but but what I did do well, and I still could if I got off my chair, is hoiva'a.
Oh yes,
okay.
yes.
Anyway, okay.
But back to the so Manu played water polo. So there's a Speedos picture out there somewhere.
Oh, yes.
That might be a contest that we have to find the Speedos.
No, we're going to save that for midnight, Manaʻo.
No, but mahalo Nainoa for joining us, and you of course are sitting over there in Panaʻewa, on the beautiful island of Hawaii, where there's lots of activity going on right now, right? You just had Mauna Loa show itself in full grandeur. I think the Pele has slowed down right now on Mauna Loa, but the Poliahu is
Did you see the ice rivers?
Yes, and ice rivers. I've never even heard of that before. Right, I know. The Waimea people and the Kohala people, right, are like that. That's a show. I think just exclusively for them. It seems like it's something that they're privy to. That those ice rivers, and then Poliahu is just on both Mauna.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
You know what's really interesting too, because we're doing this remote, is that you're in Panaʻewa, and Panaʻewa is one of the most one of the most celebrated forests in Hawaiian lore, and yet there's not much forest at all in Panaʻewa anymore. But that forest environment, and But it's that is the environment, the habitat of our discussion topics today. And so while you're there, we all remember, we think of Panaʻewa, we think of the lehua, Panaʻewa moku lehua, Panaʻewa the district of lehua, Panaʻewa maile kaluhea, fragrant maile. So I think that's really beautiful. And sometimes that's why mele are important too, because it reminds us that if the forest was there before, the forest can be there again.
Well, and I think even taking it a step forward, even a step further than that too, is like the forest can be here again, and so can our birds. I think that's a big one that I think is definitely something that can happen in our lifetimes for sure.
And I know, what made you get into the line of work that you're in now, in conservation, and particularly with our manu, with our birds?
Yeah, so for me, it's kind of started at a young age. I always loved being outside, loved all animals, insects, anything that I could put in my pockets basically would end up there. But what really kind of brought me to Hawaiian birds was I attended the Ho'omai Kaʻikaʻi explorations program in middle school. And I remember like seeing the ahu'ula for the first time, and I was just amazed. The amount of time, because like you see how small these birds are, and like the amount of time, the amount of effort, the amount of mana that went into creating those things was just incredible. But then I remember also, like, in my booklet there was 2 pictures of birds. I think it was like an iiwi and an o'o, and both of them were drawings. And I was like, oh, I wonder why they're drawings. And then, like, kind of flash forward a little bit later in life, I found out that a lot of our birds were gone. They'd gone extinct or were very rare. And that kind of just kickstarted this whole process of me wanting to come back to Hawaii and just spend my career doing what I can to bring these birds back. And hopefully to the point where we can once again, like, rebuild those Lawaiʻa Manu connections, and like even bring these birds back into our physical culture and everyday practice again. Like, that's kind of what inspired me to get in this field.
That's really interesting about if you build it, they will come. Kind of not tongue in cheek there, but in the 70s, Kamehameha schools had started the reforestation program for koa in Keauhou, which is accessible both either from volcano side or from the other side. But over the decades, and those trees, and there are acres of them. And which uncle was the one who told us? Eli. That the birds came back, especially Iwi and Apapane, and you can hear them all over the place. But you cut down somebody's house and they end up houseless. You build the house back up and they come home.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful phenomenon, and we learned a little bit about that through COVID, right? So a lot of us were able to kind of witness that, especially with our kai environments, right? The ocean environments, right? The fish are coming back, the limu was coming back, and good limu, not the bad limu. All the good limu were like starting to kind of come back,
Limu
and so
kohu is my favorite.
Yeah, mine too. And what you're saying about the forest. Why? I know I have a reason why, but why is it for you? What is important for everybody else out there to know? Why is it important for us to bring back native environments for our native birds? Why is that still significant in 2022?
I think for me, why it's so significant is it's really the direct connection to our kupuna and to this aina. Like, these birds have been here for so long, and like they are, it's the same species that the very first people who got here experienced, and so like by being in their presence, we're able to kind of build that connection back. And I think the other thing too is, like, fundamentally, these birds and these plants and these spaces are what make us Hawaiian, and so by keeping them around, it keeps us around in that sense, and so I think that's, for me, that's why it's been such an important mission, and why I've wanted to work in this field, is just to kind of keep those things alive and present, and hopefully even restore them. That's the ultimate goal, is bringing it back full circle to a place where we can have these everyday connections with these species again, and I think it's really important for building those connections, for rekindling those connections. And I think for as far as 2022 goes, it's like, even from a resource perspective, you can think about it as something like, well, yeah, these birds are this connection, but they're also a resource that we don't really utilize anymore. When, like, in the past, they used to be, like, people used to be fed on ua'u alone. And that's just one species, and so it's like, it's hard to imagine now because there's so few of them. But ultimately, if we conserve their habitats and protect the areas that they need, we could get to a point where we could potentially utilize them again. Yeah, exactly. Because, like, in Australia, you can literally buy canned seabird, because they've been able to keep their seabirds in healthy populations. And so, like, that's something that I think it all kind of comes back full circle to, even having just like resources from here, and like thinking about that sustainability and food sovereignty, you know, it that ties back to our birds as well.
That's a great example of aloha, another kind of aloha aina.
Right.
You know, we're so ma'atu going to Costco and going to, you know, Popeyes, chicken, what? We don't really think about environments for our food sources, and and that connectedness, understanding of why plants, why animals, why environmental ma'e is important is because that supports life.
Right. And
Exactly.
one of the major functions, we did this when we brought back the ahu'ula of Kalaniʻo Pu'u from Aotearoa back home. We did this documentary called Na Hulu Lehua. And in that, we talk about birds, the significance of birds, right? And the significance of an actual ahu'ula, right?
Yeah.
And an ahu'ula, to me, it's a symbolic representation. It's the material culture that comes out of a healthy forest. And the
Exactly.
reason why that's so important is because our forest is our watershed. So even before we think of the food sources that come from that, the thing that forests create is water, right? And the things that
pull
signal...
Down, they pull down the rain.
Right. And so when we see a native bird flying around, in order for that bird to be alive, and this is why they're not so much around today, is in order for that bird to still be alive, its habitat needs to be alive, right? So when we see O'o or Mamo or Apopane or I'iwi, when we see those, we know that there's water. Right. That it's funny because most people don't look at a bird and see water. But if you see a bird, then that means there's tall enough trees to form a canopy. That means that there's enough trees pulling water out of the sky. The places that we don't see birds, not seabirds, but sea birds, is indicative of how much water is actually present, how much fresh water is actually present on that island, right?
Yeah.
So to me, when we talk about bringing back the birds, it's bringing back the water, right?
Yeah. And
That's
it's
how
kinda-
we can ensure that.
Exactly. It's
You know,
bringing
I'm
back
gonna
all
go
these
back
resources.
to Kohala. I'm not,
Right.
see, no, this is supposed to be a show about birds, but I keep thinking about Mele, and I think about Kohala because here we are talking about it, and you know, water diversion. That's another thing. You know, the Kohala ditch, and actually our ohana was involved. A lot of ohanas were involved in that, but Kohala was largely forest before, as Waimea. What you go to Waimea today, you see all these beautiful rolling hills, but that's not what it was like before. So years ago in Halau, our kumu taught us a song. It's called Nani Ala Vale. And this is where the birds live today. They live in Mele. And the second verse goes like this. E kolu no ima ia uka I iwi mamo me ka o kumu pali ka umai luna ona kua iwi e kolu. Nani ala vale.
Nani, mahalo for that.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. But you're right. Our Mele give us such good data,
Clues.
right?
Yeah.
Into what is supposed to be, where, and why, right?
Yeah.
And the nani, the beauty that we find in that is because it's all those healthy environments, you know,
Yeah.
like you said.
Well, and there's a huge value in having people who know the Mele and the Oli in these spaces too, because like one thing that was one of my favorite experiences in regards to that is in the Kumulipo, the alala is the makua of alavi, and for the longest time, like I couldn't figure out why those two birds were connected, because they're very different. You know, alala is this big, black, loud bird. Alavi is a small, green, quiet bird. But then in 2018, I was fortunate to see them both foraging in the same koa tree at the same time, and it was like right there. That's how they're related, because you can see the way that they forage is almost identical, even though they're these totally different birds in totally different families. They forage in a very similar way, and so this observation was preserved in the Kumulipo that we are completely oblivious to until that time.
Wow.
There's
Wow.
I was just driving out here today to Kapolei. Again, mahalo kamehame schools. I'm here on lunchtime, but so Kaumaka Iva's Mele Ma'e Molokai is on. So that's a really up tempo, beautiful. He sings it together with
His
Te
mom,
Kuhi.
yeah.
But in there, the ua'u is in that song, and so is the auku'u, and referred to as auku'u manu ahi ahi. So, and that's a relatively that's a newer mele. But then I'm thinking, because we're Hi'iaka people, as I'm thinking about now Kaena Point, is it either Leleana or Kaena or
Leleana o Kaena.
one of those two Kaena chants, and the Wa'u is in there, the Ka'upu is in there, and but they're in there on purpose. They're not just calling out to birds. They represent things. So yeah, I tell you, I don't think about this kind of stuff very often, but I'm happy.
Yeah.
What is your day like when you wake up in the morning? How does your job work?
Well, it kind of depends. So I have my day job, which I do with the Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit, and we do kind of a whole bunch of different bird management, from predator control to banding to sampling for disease to planting native trees. Kind of a whole wide diversity of things. And then for Birds Hawaiʻi Past Present, it's kind of on my own time, and I'm mostly doing like social media and outreach, trying to, because the reason I started Birds Hawaiʻi Past Present was to kind of get at that idea of bringing Hawaiian birds into our lives every day, and social media is a really valuable tool for doing that. You can put up a picture of a bird, put up a video of a bird, and let people see and engage with a native bird every single day. And so that's kind of what started that. And so that's what I try to do. I don't quite make it to daily posts and things like that anymore, but that's kind of my goal, just trying to like re-engage and bring them into our spaces again. Cause they used to be fully integrated, but now they've just kind of been pushed into the last little remnants of their habitats.
Interesting.
Right.
Well, mahalo for your tenacity and your commitment, because we've had other shows where we're talking to our guests about their livelihood, because really, like it or not, you man cannot live on ua'u alone.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So but and not to make fun of that, but I think it's really important, and you're so young, and you're so and the fact that you're influenced or ho'olu'ia, inspired by your ho'omaka'ikai KS Explorations book, and
that is
I was inspired by my book too.
That's incredible, and so much of us, right? So if you went to Ho'omaka'ikai, that means that you weren't a student at Kamehameha in your elementary years, right? Yep. So all of us have been touched by Pauahi. Mahalo nui.
And I remember that the bird drawings you're talking about specifically.
Yeah, and the songs, right?
Yeah.
The songs that we were taught. It was the first time I ever touched an ipu, and were able to make it.
Julie Stewart Williams, she was the one who drew the birds.
Drew the book, yeah.
That's
really?
Oh.
So, but what's funny, I mean, the random thing, a kid's program book, and it changed your life.
Yeah.
So to all of those people out there, our friends who are currently still running those programs, if anybody ever asks you, hey, do we still do this anymore? Was it working anymore? Know that you have 3 people right here who will come and testify on your behalf to keep having. I know.
Okay,
and then we always wait for what year, right? Ka'i 81.
73.
And you're probably,
I don't
Nainoa, do you remember?
I think it was like 2008, maybe.
Oh my God.
And you have to do the 2 claps.
Wait,
Yep.
he said
That's
2008. Here's 70-something, 80-something, and 2000. We need to end this show now. This is too much. Yeah.
We're going to be extinct.
I know. We might end up on the red list. Yeah.
Oh, man.
But, talking about that, right? Hawaii has been tagged. I know IUCN was here a few years ago, and they published, of course, the red list of extinct or things that are about to be extinct, right? And Hawaii's become like the extinct capital of the world when it comes to native species, right? From our birds to our sea life and so forth. What's in the landscape now that we should be really kind of knowing, understanding, or focusing our advocacy on?
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest ones for us is like we're still dealing with the same problems. You know, a lot of our native birds are still just as threatened, especially on Kauai and Maui. And for our birds, kind of uniquely around the world, the biggest problem for them has actually been diseases, and specifically diseases that are spread by mosquitoes. So here in Hawaii, we didn't actually have mosquitoes in Hawaii until 1826. And they were first introduced to Lahaina, Maui through, they believe, ship ballast on the U.S. Wellington was the ship that potentially brought them in. And then they slowly spread across the chain. And as soon as the mosquitoes arrived, a wave of extinction followed. And it was just like with us, you know, like we weren't resistant to European diseases. Our birds had been isolated from these diseases for millions of years. And so it just decimated their populations. And so kind of the big thing that's happening right now, and actually there's a environmental assessment that's up for public comment at Haleakala National Park right now. But they're talking about using what's called, they kind of term it like a mosquito birth control. And what they do is they use this naturally occurring bacteria called Wolbachia, and it lives inside of almost all insects. It's kind of like, you know how we have E. coli living inside of us? It's kind of a natural beneficial bacteria. Insects have Wolbachia. But the interesting thing is if one mosquito has a different strain of Wolbachia than another one, they can't have fertile eggs. So they'll still mate and like have babies, but they won't hatch, you know. And so it's a way to like reduce populations. And in some places, they've been able to reduce mosquito numbers by as much as 96% using this technique.
Wow.
Yeah, so the hope is to raise a bunch of these male mosquitoes, which don't bite. So only female mosquitoes bite. So the hope is to raise a bunch of these male mosquitoes. Yeah.
I was waiting for that. It took him half a second to respond to that one.
Yeah, there you go. So they want to raise a bunch of these male mosquitoes to release them so that they'll go mate with the wild females and then cause the population to crash, and that would hopefully protect our birds and in addition protect us.
Wild females.
Right.
But we don't see. We're so disconnected sometimes from Aina and from even things like this. We forget that one thing impacts another thing, which impacts another thing. So this is it's a really good reminder to remember who we are and where we come from.
Yeah. Is there any drawback to having? I'm sure they're having these consultations and asking for comment. Because is there any drawbacks? Like, can they hurt any other populations of, say, like, I know the bee population, right, is so important to like the world living. Like, does it have potential impacts on other species?
That's the greatest thing about this Wolbachia technique is, as far as we know, like the chances of it having any negative impacts are like almost zero compared to like other traditional mosquito control methods, you know, because like what they do in the Southeast United States is they spray insecticide all over. So they kill billions of beneficial insects every year. But with this Wolbachia, it specifically targets one species of mosquito in one area, you know, so it's very, very target specific. There's a really small chance of like horizontal transfer happening where the Wolbachia could get introduced to other insect species, but that wouldn't hurt them. You know, it's just like they just might pick it up. But it's like a almost 0% chance. It's just something that could happen.
We gotta find something for the koki frogs.
Oh yeah, we need a little Wolbachia for the koki.
Yeah, exactly.
For the people on Hawaii
ants.
Island
and the fire ants.
Yeah.
Oh, fire ants.
Boy,
Yeah, let's do fire ants first. Yeah, let's do fire ants
please.
first. I know that's
Bites.
been. Yeah. And then we could just tell in Puerto Rico, the koki frog is like an aumakua over there. Yeah. That was shocking for me to find out, but they read their songs about it and everything. I was like, wow. And in Hawaii, it's just a loud pest.
But they say one man's koki is another man's, you know.
Yeah.
Oh man.
No, mahalo Nainoa for that. That's a important thing for us to know. And so that's currently going on right now on Maui.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're having those discussions.
Starting on Maui, having these conversations. So it's a great place to go and learn more. I think January 3rd is like the first public meeting, if I remember off the top of my head. But it's a great place to just kind of go and learn more information from people that know a lot more about it than I do. So, and sorry, I was going to add just one other thing too. Like the other great thing about mosquitoes being not native here is that none of our native species depend on them for food. So like on the continent, there's a lot of native birds that eat them, and it'd be an important food resource. But here, none of our birds rely on them. So that's another way that it's not going to have much of an impact.
Back to that impact. We talked about this before. Also, the rapid ohia death. I just saw something on the news the other day about how they're combating that. But that's another example. If the lehua trees are not here, the birds they feed off the pua lehua, the water that's captured in the lehua. And of course we know that, but that's why preserving forests are so important. And humankind today did like nothing more than tearing down forests. Without any concept of how that's gonna impact. So water, relationships, poetic metaphor and symbolism, amazing.
And so, Nainoa, how does your organization kind of intersect with these challenges that are going on, or kind of like what's the work of the organization as a whole? And are you guys like a membership organization where people can, if they're interested also in doing more work about our sustainability of our manu, can they get involved in your organization?
Yeah, so Birds Hawaiʻi Past Present is kind of like, it's a very fledgling organization. So we're kind of just getting started. And like I said, I kind of really just developed these social media pages.
Funny you use the word fledgling.
I know.
I thought
I had to throw it in there. I had to throw it in there.
You good, eh? You.
That was great. I was like, oh, he even speaks bird. Yeah, he talks bird too.
Chirp, chirp.
Yeah, every day.
But back to your fledgling comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think kind of the purpose behind it is more to connect people to the organizations that are doing what needs to be done. So I think for what I do on Birds Hawaiʻi Past Present, I'm mostly trying to connect people to birds, and also to connect people to organizations, and also to like opportunities to make a difference. So for instance, one thing that was a little bit of a disappointment here yesterday, I was really trying to get people to support what's called the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. And this is kind of like a big bill thing, but it basically would have allocated over $60 million to Hawaii every year for species conservation. But unfortunately, it just failed in the Senate just yesterday. So it almost made it, but it didn't quite make it. But yeah, so those are the kind of things that I really try to like push and advocate for, is just like these big changes that could really benefit our native birds.
Nainoa, on that, do you know how our Hawaii delegation voted on that by any chance?
So fortunately, there was not a vote in the Senate, but all 4 of our Hawaii delegates were co-sponsors on the bill. So both Case and everybody was a co-sponsor on the bill.
And
so we had support
and all that. Okay.
Yeah, and Shots. Yeah, we had support locally, but yeah, just unfortunately at the national level, it just didn't quite make it through. But yeah, it's a pretty big blow. But hopefully we can get other things going. Like there's been some movement on like a green fee here in Hawaii, which basically would and so that's the kind of thing that I'm really excited for, because that would be a huge step in the right direction. Because like that's kind of been like the story here, is that we were always a day too late and $1 short. And so I think like really trying to correct that $1 short period, I think would really help benefit a lot of our species. And then just recently, I've gotten a little bit more involved with actual on-the-ground conservation work in Ka'u, because we had some IO show up there for the first time since the 1890s. So we've been doing some predator control to protect them.
You said Ka'u. What showed up over there?
IO, the Hawaiian stilts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's the first time they've been there, and they had babies. So it's the first time they've had chicks there in a very long time. So we're pretty excited about that.
What are their predators that you guys have to do predator control for? Is it cats? Is it...
Yeah, pretty much the same things that impact the forest birds: cats, mongoose, and rats.
I again back to this Mele thinking, because I was reading through the notes earlier, and I see that alai ula is a bird we can talk about also. So for our friends out there, so the alai is a mud hen, It's a kind of a chicken.
Like white alai.
And that white alai, why not?
Yeah.
But anyway, but I'm thinking about now Israel's song about Hawaiian Superman. So it talks about because these birds apparently they kept the secret of the aunaki, the sticks to make wood. And he says in the song, and you folks know this lyrics, and he squeezed Alai's throat until she told the secret, how to make fire. And that is so cute. And people hear that song for 20 years now. And I wonder if people know that Alai Ula is a real part of our Hawaii world.
Right, and it comes, directly in the story of Mauiaka Malo, right, where they've captured that mo'olelo and that knowledge system of the Alai.
That's why you songwriters out there, keep it coming.
I know, we gotta love the hakumele.
More people can understand. Thank you, Kuka Hakalau.
Yeah, and Manu Boyd. I know you've written a bunch of songs too.
But birds are, birds are a metaphor. A bird and lehua, metaphor for intimate relations.
Right.
And there are, I can make a list. Another song, Manu o, written by Harry Naope. O ka manu o I malama ahenani ko hulu kele ia, and so on. We sing it all the time, but do we really think about it?
Right.
And they're so romantic.
That's my shower song.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's I don't mean to put images out there, but it's the one that I sing. I sing because nobody else. I don't care if anybody's listening to me at that time, but it is such a beautiful song.
I cannot wait to
it's
go
such
home
a beautiful.
And when you're done, you can sing the Pau Au Waltz.
Yeah. But I love that song. I love that song. But you're right. I need to actually really think through that song now because I sing it, but
Well, you always look so fresh.
I do a lot of singing, which would be the word, the code word for au now. Yeah.
Okay, Mossman. So who is our other cousin down in Ka'u is involved in preservation as well. There's a lot. Some of the most important jobs in the world can be described, I bet, as the loneliest jobs. And they're so important. Lighthouse keepers, bird catchers, but it's again, hats off to you, vehe papale, because people don't have time for that these days. Yeah,
right.
You do. And mahalo ya'oi.
And it takes time, right? The kinds of stuff and the kinds of things that you described are actually spending time on Aina, Aina, making observations. I mean, to me, I'm still stuck on what you said about the kumulipo and about those two birds that, because I'm one, I've, been in various study groups specifically about the kumulipo, and we're always wondering about those pairings, but we're doing that type of talking through and thinking through in places where 4 walls, right? And some of us do get out there. I just tell everybody this: you should have one friend in your group of friends, right? In your squad, there should be at least one bird person. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys that right now. Our bird person is Ulalia Woodside. Shout out to Ulalia.
Perfect.
But she is our bird person because her father was a bird person, right? And of course, she runs all of just tell her she's the queen of conservation out there with the Nature Conservancy. But she's like our bird person, and any bird questions we have, we go to her. But because of the significance and our distance, right, our physical distance, like a lot of us, to Manu's point, are not out there every day, surrounded by the environment that holds all this knowledge there. And so we don't get to see these interactions. And like you said, between the Manu and the Pualehua, that symbiotic relationship, right? Which we always personify as this romantic relationship, right? But that significance of that to the entirety of our life cycle here in Hawaii, it's often overlooked and dismissed, but so significant, right, when we really think about
another Olelo break here. The Hawaiian word that many of us know is ho'omanawanui. And ho'omanawanui is to be, and you usually get scolded, ho'omanawanui, be patient. But when you break it down, ho'omanawa nui is also like to create a lot of time. In other words, you have to set aside this much time to get this job done. You cannot make an ahu'ula overnight. Ho'omanawa nui. So the same thing with the people who are living in the mountains, because they're not because they have nothing better to do. They're taking the time to get the job done. And get it done right. So ho'omanawa nui, don't use it only as a scolding word for your kids. You just remind them that things of value take time.
Yeah.
Like you, Mehana. Always so fresh after the au.
After singing my Manu O'o. One thing you mentioned this earlier, and I'm going to ask you about how are the different ways that we can help advocate. You mentioned Maui already, and and getting involved with kind of really understanding and then hopefully deploying that natural kind of solution to the mosquito problem on Maui. But you also brought up the Green Pass, right? Which is something that we're it's gonna come up in this year's legislature, right? More and more people are talking about it. We here at CNHA might be jumping into, figuring out that too, because we've seen that around the world, right? In different places where natural environments are getting such a heavy impact from outside that communities are responding with, wait a minute, how do we mitigate this, right? But what are some other ways that we can help advocate for our manu?
I think one of the simplest ones is just getting out there and seeing them. I think a lot of us times we think these birds are so far away, so hard to come by, but oftentimes they're right in front of you. In downtown Honolulu, you got Manuoku. There's Manuoku on all the trees practically nowadays. And that's a native bird. And that's a native bird that has had a conservation success story in the last 20 years. And so that's the kind of thing where I think just taking maybe one day every once in a while, you go and find a native bird that you can build a connection to. Because it kind of starts from there, once you get that familiarity, and it's something that we can all do too,
Manu Oku, and it's interesting. I know that bird. I worked at Helumoa for years, Royal Hawaiian Center at Helumoa in Waikiki, and in Building B, there's this big tree. It's a exotic tree, but that is a nesting ground for the Manu Oku. Manu Oku later was assigned or selected as the Aumakua for Hokulea. Because that ferry turn, and other seabirds, they are the ones who help canoes get to where they gotta go.
Let you know that.
So the application of traditional ancient knowledge today is still relevant.
Right. Especially where we can visualize them. So thank you for that. That is something that we can all do, right? And you hinted also to something I meant to ask you about, but you're already talking about it, is some of those success stories, right? Because we often focus on, the birds that are going extinct because it just seems like such a loss. But if we can understand the success stories, then maybe we can manifest those over and over too, right? So you touched on Manu Oku, but what else can we do, and or what other success stories do we have out there?
I think
with our manu.
When you look at the seabirds is where you see a lot of success, especially on Oahu. You have the Pacific Rim conservation folks who are doing a ton of work. They're actually bringing a lot of birds from the northwestern Hawaiian Islands in Papahanaumokuakea to Oahu, and they're starting to breed and reproduce there for the first time in hundreds of years potentially. The Nunulu is one in particular that's been doing very well in James Campbell National Wildlife Refuge. And then even here on Hawaii Island, we've had a lot of really good success with just in 2020 we had Kauai'ula start nesting on the island for the first time, and since then we've done a little bit of predator control to protect them. Now there's up to over a dozen nests as of last year. So it's in a very quick period of time. In a very quick period of time, you can get a really successful change with just a little bit of action. And so I think that's kind of another way you can help, is by just getting involved with these different conservation groups around Hawaii.
One of a really important cultural symbol in lore and in Olelo is the kahili. So the kahili, the feather stand, we use them today to decorate stages, but they belong there. They're there to stand with the ali'i. And those were made from the seabirds that we're talking about, from the ua'u, from the koa ekea, the koa eula, and others. So that because the plumes are long, you cannot make a kahili out of an o'o.
Right.
You know, so and even though people say, oh, well, the ali'i, they're all gone. Well, maybe not. And to know then that those birds, because they're high flying, like the io,
Right.
and that's why the hawk,
The haupu,
that's why
moli,
iolani is that high-ranking name. It's the highest bird in the sky. But all of those hulu are representative of our rich heritage.
Yeah. And, you know, the first place that I saw in Oahu, actually, and talking about kahili and birds, those really large birds, is up at Pihe Manu, otherwise known as Midway, in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. That was the first place I saw in Oahu, actually. We were planting kavelu grass around their habitats because they bury in the ground and got to watch where you walk or else you're going to fall into their pukas, right? Along and then fall on them. That's what they didn't want. They was just like, you can fall in the puka, but don't kill the birds. You know, so we were very watchful about where we walked. But, you know, another phenomenon up in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands in Papahanao Mokuakea is that places like Pihe Manu have like 1 million kaupu or moli on them, right? When we went up there, I was just like, thank goodness I do not have a fear of birds, or I would have, I don't know, fainted. I think I would have had a heart attack, because there were literally 1 million of them on the islands, on that island, right? That and the island right across the water from them. So that's good too, that those islands in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, you know, mahalo for bringing them up, because they've served also not only for the marine life, but also for the bird life as some of the spaces that's been able to kind of help them, those populations stay alive. Right.
Yeah.
But that only works for certain birds, right? And it's all those ocean-faring birds.
You know, just a real quick one too. Two things. Number one, you know, there's a little island, Moku Auia, they call Gold Island, off of Malai Kahana. And we go out there. That's the first time I ever see. The pukas you're talking about the birds. The other one is back to a song. I'm thinking again of Israel Kamaka Viva Ole and his rendition of Kahuila Vai, and it speaks about a place there which is named for a bird, and that is Moli Lele. So that means a flying moli bird. And they're so sacred, we say moli hemolele, holy moly. No, we don't say that. But
people will now start saying that.
There's all of these birds, so it makes your job easier for us because you don't have to go and do research.
Right.
Turn on 105.1.
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah, listen to Hawaiian music, right? And then get out there, because like you said, a lot of these birds are still around if we just take the time to look at them. Many of the birds, yes, if you're in the Costco parking lot and you know you see the cardinals are all down, I swear they hang out at Costco. It must be for the leftover hot dogs or something that people leave behind. But you'll also get to see in our environment, especially here in Honolulu, like the Manu Oku, like you mentioned, right? If you're on anywhere around the North Shore, or Kolea, you see Kolea, right, out and about now, especially, and then some of the other larger birds, you might have to go to special places. But to your point, right, that we should celebrate those that are there, right, by at least engaging with them, you know. And sorry, you was about to say something.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, and even like forest birds on Oahu, like the Oahu Amakihi, like in Manoa Valley, you know, you can get them in your yard. You know, there's these birds will come and visit you if you create a space for them, and the knowledge to understand when they're there.
What is the status of the elepaio?
So it depends on which island. The Kauai species is doing pretty good. The Oahu one is still kind of declining in areas where they're not actively controlling rats. And then the Hawaii Island one is doing pretty well.
I asked about the Oahu one in particular. You mentioned Manoa, because Manoa is such it's so storied and sung about and chanted about. But in the story of Kahala Opuna, who is the rainbow, ali'i wahine of Manoa Valley, her cousin is the elepaio. And every time she's being killed by Kauhi, he has to dig her up and bring her back to life, and the pueo and all of that. But the thing about the elepaio, which is also in other songs, is the elepaio is the first bird to sing in the morning and the last bird to sing at night.
Aww. Yeah.
I just want to hug my.
They're the best.
I know.
They're such great birds.
Go out and we should do that. Go out and hug a bird.
Happy to hear that Kauai, Oahu, and Hawaii are doing well because of efforts like your organization and yourself and the lonely jobs at the top, literally.
Right.
Up in the Kuaiwi. Yeah, amazing. That's such a olu spirit.
Yeah.
I can't believe I played water polo with your father. And by the way, if you were joined us earlier, the picture has been located.
Yeah, we found the picture.
Anyway.
Yeah, we found the picture.
Put that away. Oh, wait. No, but anyway. But this is good. We talked about this in another show too, and I will say it again to remind our lahui. We have worked so hard to get our language back and to reclaim our identity and all that sometimes we take ourselves too seriously. So always find room to aloha people and always find time to ho'omake aka. Make a joke, be funny, and do it tastefully though. Because some people use other people as jokes for them.
Oh yeah.
And that is what we call alamihi lave o lelo o ke kauna. Little crabs who run around throwing words around. Gossip. Manu halu vala au. Oh, another bird.
Another bird.
Right from Hi'ilave.
Right. Right.
So birds are not, they're not always about loving metaphors. They're talking about, it's a kuamuamu.
Okay.
So all they do is gossip. All they are interested in other people's business because they know more on their own. Another saying that comes from the forest. Hoiaku iko va'a. Paddle your own canoe.
Oh yeah.
Ikumau.
Ikumau. We should end that in our shows every time with that. Ikumau.
Right. Drag that log down and build a boat and catch something to feed your family.
Right. Mahalo Nainoa for joining us today on Midday Manaʻo. It's been such a pleasure.
We are cousins. I mean, Mossmans and boys, Pili Ohana.
And I'm sure there's a Lindsay intertwined in there too.
If you're not a Lindsay, you better go check.
You gotta be, right?
Every Hawaiian is part Lindsay, I swear.
Right. So we mahalo you for taking your time today to zoom in from Pane'ewa, Hawaii. A place we both have fond memories of. And
we were just talking about Kihe Nahale'a.
Right, and the Nahale'a family.
All of our Hawaiian homesteaders, all of our
and Auntie Puama.
Everybody.
Right.
I hope you guys are enjoying this midday.
Yeah, mahalo for having me. It's really been enjoyable, and I always love to talk about the birds. So.
Yeah. And then we'll come back for Midnight Manaʻo. We keep saying this, so hopefully somebody else will help us manifest Midnight Manaʻo. But then we can talk about the birds and the bees.
Yeah, but remember that birds are people too.
And birds are people too.
Very enjoyable.
Yes, and so for all of you out there who are interested in this kind of work, please check Nainoa out, Nainoa Mossman, and his foundation that he started, his group that he's started, Hawaiian Birds Past and Present. Wait, did I say that right? Oh no, Birds of Hawaii Past and Present.
Okay.
Yeah,
is
that right, Nainoa?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, go check them out on social media.
We should add a future to that.
Oh yeah.
Probably
Past,
should.
present, and future. Look at us. We just ho'okuliana ya'oa. Yeah, we're just gonna put more on top of your plate. Now go think about the future,
and now we're gonna go back to Costco, go eat hot dogs.
Yeah.
Battle with the minor birds.
But mahalo nui again to you, Nainoa, and mahalo to all of you out there, our Midday Manaʻo audience. We love hearing from you folks. As we walk around town and walk around Hawaii, and even as far as I've gone to Seattle and Las Vegas and have had people come up to me and tell me that they watched the show, and Manu probably has too. So thank you guys out there for joining us every week.
Sometimes it's more serious than others, but again, always find light and humor and relevance and joy and mana in what you say and what you do.
Yeah, and on that note, everyone,
aloha.
Ahui ho kako. Aloha.
Aloha ko Pane'ewa moku lehua ma. Ai, aloha.